to start off with our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of Kathleen Moore. And we're offering victim advocates and any assistance that they need during this time. The one thing, we at Pasco Sheriff's Office, when we find somebody is missing, they've run away, we post their information as soon as possible. The one thing that our detectives talk about in this case is the amount of family that have reached out, the amount of loved ones that have reached out. Whether it was Kathleen's nursing school friends, people that she works with, the amount of love that they were showing trying to find her. So if there's one thing that I can tell the family is that Kathleen was absolutely loved by this community.
Welcome to Stillspeakpod. Tonight is a very sad night. A press conference was held at 8 p.m. Eastern Time about missing Kathleen Moore, and they announced that they made an arrest in her disappearance, and they did arrest the boyfriend, Colin Knapp. Now, we're going to play the rest of this, but before we do that, I want to say that my heart goes out to the family and friends of Kathleen Moore, and I can attest to what the sheriff just said. I spoke to several of her friends and one of her siblings, and that was my biggest takeaway, was that Kathleen was highly loved, and they were all frantic trying to find her. This was an absolute nightmare for them, and she was just so loved. And if we can all have this many people that care about us and love us, wow, I'm blown away by the amount of support she had with this. Once she went missing, everyone knew something was wrong. I hoped and prayed for a different outcome, and sadly, that is not the case. Now, he's going to get into details and tell you how they came to this conclusion. We will discuss what he said, because I can probably explain some of the things that people have questions about. This is a huge loss, and my deepest condolences go out to the family and friends.
That domestic violence occurs in every community. And here in Pasco County, we have Sunrise Domestic Violence Shelter. So if there's anybody in a situation that violence is going on in their relationship, please reach out to Sunrise. There is help. There are people that want to help you. Whether call 911, get the sheriff's office, we will get you in touch with Sunrise. We need the community's assistance right now, because we are looking for the body of Kathleen. We need any tips we can get, and I will get further into that information. But the other part is, which I know a lot of people have figured out, there's an arrest. The Pasco Sheriff's Office, along with the State Attorney's Office, I want to thank Bruce Bartlett for his leadership there. We've arrested Colin Scott Knapp with second-degree murder. So a lot of the information I have is still preliminary. This is still an ongoing investigation. Sergeant Rose is here. He leads up the Major Crimes Unit. There are some things we can answer. There are some things that we cannot answer. And there are some things that we shouldn't answer. And right now, we're trying to get resolution. We wish that Colin would provide us the information of where Kathleen is. And we delayed this press conference a little bit because we just arrested him this afternoon. We were hoping he was going to provide information during his interview. As one of our detectives described, he was very cold. Even when we were begging with him to tell us where her body is, he wouldn't give us that information. The other reason we can't talk about some things right now is because we have to find justice for Kathleen and for her family. There are things only the Pasco Sheriff's Office knows, the State Attorney's Office knows, and Colin Knapp knows. If we release that information, we can hinder the investigation, we can hinder prosecution, and we can hinder justice in this case. I want to thank Bruce Bartlett and the State Attorney's Office. They've been great partners in this. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Office and FDOE, their biology lab work.
Let's talk about this real quickly. So we later find out in the Q&A section of this press conference that Colin was cooperative at the start, but his story was inconsistent and it alarmed them that she was not okay. Once he was arrested, he no longer, was cooperative, and he has taken the fifth, and he wanted a lawyer. At that point, there's nothing they can do. They can't utter a single question to him once he asks for a lawyer. So at this time, he's not willing to cooperate. He's not willing to give the location of her body, and he's not giving up any form of confession. So this arrest was based upon their investigation. And let's talk about the investigation. So often people in the public, when they see these cases, they get aggravated or frustrated or annoyed, or they start bashing the police because they're not releasing information. And I'm always having to remind people, this is an active investigation. If you tell one person, even if it's a parent of the person, something, it can spread so freaking fast. So if they told the mother yesterday something that was evidentiary, right, and then she tells her daughter, right, and then that daughter tells a friend, and that friend tells another friend, and then that friend goes to social media. Do you see how this works? So this is why they have to be careful, because there's information that only the person who harmed her would know. And this is why they keep everything under wraps. It's not that they don't want to give you the information, but they're working to get justice for the person who's missing. And we need to be more patient and more understanding, because we all want that, right? We want her family to get justice and closure. So there was a lot of people who were going around saying, oh, they're not doing anything, and they're not, holding press conferences, and da-da-da-da-da, and they were complaining, but that's actually not true. They actually were doing things. They uncovered a lot of information, which led to his arrest. The last she was seen was after midnight, last week, after Saturday midnight, so it was Sunday early morning. We're now on Monday, and they already have an arrest. So they were working very diligently. Just because you don't see it physically doesn't mean it's not happening. I know people go, oh, it's so obvious that he did something, just arrest him already. But that's just not how it works. It just doesn't work that way. And trust me, if you're ever in a situation where you're a quote-unquote person of interest, or somebody the police may think is involved and you're not, you would be very glad for these protocols and procedures that they do. Because you wouldn't want them to hastily arrest you based upon nothing and just the public's opinion of you. I know this sounds common sense to most people, but believe it or not, there are still people out there who were criticizing them for not already arresting him days ago. They had to make sure. You can't just say, oh, well, we think it's him. We're just going to slap some handcuffs on him and call it a day. It doesn't work that way.
So this is the timeline of events that we have so far. On November 28th, between 10 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., Kathleen and Colin left Largo after a night of socializing, hanging out with friends at multiple bars in Largo and Indian Rocks Beach. Kathleen and Colin had been arguing at some of these bars. They left in his Cadillac and arrived around 12:30 a.m. the next morning. So it's the same night, just going past midnight. So it's 12:30 a.m. on November 29th at the 7-Eleven at Carmel Avenue and Seven Springs Boulevard in Pasco County. Colin buys cigarettes, and he states that Kathleen was in the vehicle. Well, we looked at the tapes, and unfortunately the tapes aren't very clear. So we aren't 100% sure if she was in the vehicle or not in the vehicle. And anybody who's seen some surveillance tapes, it's very hard to find out exactly where that person is. but we're still trying to look for more information on that part. Colin told us that they go to the Carmel Avenue, his residence on Carmel Avenue, where they have another argument. At this point, Colin claims that Kathleen left with her backpack and just left the residence. There is no evidence that we have right now that shows that she left that residence. So Colin then, about an hour later, before decides to go to his job, which is at Harold Seltzer's Steakhouse in Port Richey. He's a kitchen manager there, and he wanted to complete a meat inventory order around 1:30 a.m. I also want to thank Harold Seltzer's restaurant. They've done a very good job cooperating with us, providing us information, so I want to thank them very much for being a partner in this case. Kathleen, she went missing early Monday morning. We cannot find any evidence after the fact that he told us she was at his house, from that moment on. She was originally reported missing out of Pinellas County. Pinellas County got that case early Tuesday morning. Pinellas County started running with that right away. Then, later on in the afternoon, they realized she was last missing in Pasco County. That's when Pasco County picks up the case. The preceding days after that early Monday morning, when everybody lost track of her, nobody's seen her. Nobody saw her at school, nobody saw her at work. She was supposedly very active on social media. No accounts, nothing was being seen on social media. Pinellas County then pinged her phone, and there was a man who had found her phone at the Walgreens. He actually tells us that he dumpster dives, and he found that there at the Seven Springs Boulevard on Little Road. So we continue to follow up information there. So we found out through the investigation that Colin had some garments of clothes that he had taken to work at Harold Seltzer's. He then puts it in the dumpster there. We find out in the investigation. Our detectives meet up with the waste management people, ask to get all that stuff that's in the dumpster brought to a landfill, and they go through that.
No one goes to work at 1:30 in the morning to do a meat inventory. So yes, that's a huge red flag, especially after you had been out just an hour or two prior to that. All of a sudden, you're just going to go to work and do inventory? Yeah, no. What's interesting to me here is that it does not appear that they have surveillance footage of who put the phone into the dumpster. And they didn't mention that they saw any surveillance footage of him putting that phone in the dumpster. And if you think about that, if her phone had never been found, where would this case be? Because that was the first red flag. How the hell did her phone end up in this dumpster? So if he never found the phone, and there's no footage of them, who put it in the dumpster, that dumpster would eventually been picked up and brought to a landfill. And they may not have ever found it at that point. It does sound to me, though, that they had footage of him putting something in his work dumpster. That's what it sounds like to me, because he says during the investigation, they found out that he had taken clothes with him and that he had put those clothes in the work dumpster. I really can't think of any other way that they would have known that if there was not footage of him actually doing that. Which, if you work there, wouldn't you know that there's cameras out there? But okay. Or maybe it was that there was a coworker at the job and maybe they witnessed him putting it into the trash. That's also possible. But I'm leaning towards there was some type of footage showing him putting clothes in the dumpster. We may or may not find that out at a later date. What's also interesting to me is the other day I talked about how they were at the landfill and it was being said that it was possibly connected to missing Kathleen Moore. And everybody's brain went to they were looking for her body. And what we actually found out is that they made the people who pick up the dumpsters take that dumpster to the landfill and dump it out there so that they had an area that was open for them to spread it out and search in there for these articles of clothing. Which is really smart, right? Instead of jumping in the dumpster and trying to dig through all that trash, which you can easily miss something. I've accidentally actually thrown my wallet out in my own trash, and I put it in a trash bin outside my home that had a whole bunch of trash bins because I had pulled out a whole bunch of garbage one day, and I had to dig through my own garbage, and oh my gosh, it took me forever, and I overlooked the wallet 2 or 3 different times as I looked in the same bag over and over again. So this was really wise for them to do, to have it dumped at the landfill, and that way they can really look closely and be spread out.
I can't tell you the dedication of the women and men in that unit, of the entire Pasco Sheriff's Office, but let me just emphasize in that unit right now. They were digging through the dirt. They were digging through all that mess. Think about a restaurant dumpster. They were going through it. Day in and day out. They were constantly going through it. There are women and men in that unit that have barely slept in the past 6 days. They have a few hours of sleep. That's how dedicated they are. We've had canines out there searching. We've had drones out searching. We've had every tool possible. We do everything. When somebody goes missing, we will put every resource out there to find them. As they were going through that search, they find his article of clothing, and they find bloodstains on it. We send those bloodstains to the FDLE. Again, I thank the FDLE biology lab. They did a phenomenal job. They worked relentlessly. They matched those blood to Kathleen. So we went back to State Attorney Bruce Bartlett's office, who got a judge to sign off on a second-degree homicide warrant for Colin Knapp, which we immediately served this afternoon. Colin Knapp, his date of birth is 6/1991. He has 10 previous felony arrests and 9 misdemeanor arrests since 2004. Some included ag assault, ag battery, and domestic violence. In that case, Kathleen was not involved. Again, our hearts and prayers pour out to the family and friends of Kathleen Moore. I know you are all searching for a better resolution, and we all were. But unfortunately, this is what we have. And so I ask God to look over all of us and to look over you, because I know you're looking for answers. I know right now you are in awful pain. And may God bless you during this time, and know that this sheriff's office is going to continue to work hard with Bruce Bartlett and the state attorney's office to ensure that justice is done in this case. And I know it won't bring her back, but at the same time, know how much she was loved by so many people in this community. And if that's the one thing that our legacy is how much we are loved by others, she has a legacy that's greater than so many of us will ever have. Again, for the fact that domestic violence occurs in every community, if you're in a domestic violence relationship, please get help. There are people that want to help you. They don't want it ending like this. For Colin Knapp, who's in this facility right now, know that there is a God. Know that He knows all the answers. And right now you have an opportunity to do something positive when you had done so much evil. Please share with us right now where Kathleen is, so we can do something for the family. We can give them some type of resolution. The other one is, anybody out there with any information, please, this is the location if you have a tip, if you have any information, or is there...
I don't plan on sharing the Q&A section of this video. So you heard him say that they found the article of clothing that they had been looking for. When they found it, there was blood on it. They sent it off. That blood ended up being Kathleen's. So you're probably wondering, well, how much blood? Well, they answered that. And this is how they came to the conclusion that she is no longer alive. there was a lot of her blood on his clothing. That's a piece of evidence that connects him to her disappearance. And because we can't lose a lot of blood and survive, there was enough for them to come to the conclusion that she could not have survived. So this is what led to them making the arrest. There are other pieces of evidence that also was included in that they're not sharing at this time, because they're hoping that he'll change his mind, give a confession, and possibly tell them where her body is. Depending on what website you look at, criminal cases, about 95 to 98% of them end in plea deals. Whether you're guilty or you're innocent, they usually end in plea deals because people would rather take the plea deal and not take the risk of going to trial with it, where anything can happen. So they just take the one that has the lower risk. They do their time or whatever the deal is, and they move on with their lives. And believe it or not, there are a lot of innocent people who do take plea deals because it just seems like the easier way out. And I know a lot of people always say, I would never take a plea deal if I was innocent. You have no idea if you would or you wouldn't, okay? Because there's actually a lot of people who do. And you don't know until you're in that position, and you have to weigh which one is more risky. And some people just find that it's easier just to accept a plea deal. I know it sounds crazy to the average person, but I think it's probably a whole lot different when you experience it. In addition, a lot of people don't realize that people confess to crimes they didn't commit all the time. Again, it sounds insane. Like, why would you confess to a crime that you didn't commit? Like, are you freaking insane? Why would you do that? But they do. And there's all different reasons why. There's research about it. Who knows, right? So investigators operate with the mindset that one day that case will go to trial. They do not operate with the mindset of, oh, well, this will probably end up in a plea deal, so we can do a half-assed job. No, they're going to do it like it was going to trial. And let's say, this is a hypothetical, and I'm going to try not to get too graphic here in case Kathleen's family is listening. Let's say he comes forth, he confesses, but he says that he strangled her. We all know strangulation, there shouldn't be a lot of blood, okay? And let's say it goes to trial, and the prosecutor presents it as he shot her or whatever that causes blood. And his lawyer comes along and says, well, my client, in his own words, said he strangled her. Well, now the poor jury is going to be very confused, and they're going to be trying to reconcile in their minds why this man would confess, go as far as to confess, but to not state the proper cause of death. And that would raise doubt. And that's what a trial is all about. Reasonable doubt. So if they're sitting there thinking, oh man, I don't know if this guy did it, because I mean, why would he confess and say he strangled when she was, shot? I mean, maybe it wasn't him. Maybe he doesn't know how she died. In addition to that, when you look at like this article of clothing with her blood, the defense's job is to defend his client. So he's going to say all sorts of things that sound crazy to us, but it's things that raise doubt. So he can turn around and be like, oh, that shirt, he lended that to Paul, this guy he used to work with, and he never gave it back to him. So at the time that Kathleen went missing, that wasn't even his shirt. Now that sounds crazy to you, that sounds crazy to me, but that's the defense's position. And then the jury has to decide, do they believe that or do they doubt that? So they share this blood information, and the reason that they chose to share that piece of evidence is because It's a piece of evidence that lets the family and the public know that they are sure she is no longer with us. And it's basically like, listen, she's no longer with us. There's no way she could have survived based upon the amount of blood we found. There's other evidence. They just haven't shared it with us because they're going to wait and see what he decides to do. Is he going to continue to be quiet? Is he going to confess? Is there somebody out there who knew about this? And there's only a few people who know that information, law enforcement being one of them. And if somebody comes forth with information, they'll know if they're telling the truth or not based upon the evidence they have. And does it match what they're saying? If I told you something really personal, and I know for a fact you were the only freaking person I told nobody else but you, and somehow everybody on the internet knew about it, well, process of elimination, right? You're the only person I told. So, yeah, you're guilty. If I tell 3 of you something personal and then it gets out, now I have to look at 3 people. And if I go to all 3 people and they tell me some sort of story, I gotta see, based upon the evidence that I have, which one fits that evidence. Their goal at this point now is to locate Kathleen and get her justice. And justice looks different for everybody. And I think we so often think of justice as the person being charged, arrested, you're in a trial, you get to face them, watch them get sentenced to either, life in prison or the death penalty. But justice is actually different for every victim's family and every victim if they don't have family. And the definition of that changes. Some people believe that by helping others, let's just say in a domestic violence situation, is justice for them because they're helping somebody out. To another family, seeing somebody sentenced to life in prison, in person, in a courtroom is justice. In other cases, they say, well, hearing the entire story and that person getting what they deserve, that's justice. So it varies. And it's not going to be the same because grief is different for every single person. And it's the one thing we should never, ever, judge. You should never look and say, well, that person doesn't look like they're grieving. Please don't ever do that. Please, for the love of God, don't ever do that. It is so different for every single person. We are all different. We handle differently. And then you throw grief into the mix, and it looks different for everyone. And so, because grief looks different for everyone, and I don't know what that beeping was, their understanding, their definition of justice is also going to be different. Because you want justice for the victim, but if you're a loved one or a friend, you also feel like you want justice for your loved one. And that justice is something that you may want as a form of closure or to reconcile or to help you in the grief process. So it varies. And I think we really need to kind of stop, speaking in terms of justice is only if a case goes to trial and somebody's sentenced to life or death. That's it. There's so many different other forms of justice. Honestly, now I can't say this for 100% sure because I've never been in that position, and you can't fully understand or know something until you're in that position or experience it. But I've always had this thought that when a case ends in a plea deal, or if the suspect ends their own life, I feel like it kind of does save the victim's family a lot of heartache. I don't think there's people out there who realize how grueling a trial is. And gosh, some of these families have to like fly back and forth for the trial if they don't live in the same state. And you have to sit there day after day for hours upon hours listening to all this testimony and objections. And it's exhausting, okay, for these families. And you're reliving it all over again, and you're learning information that you didn't know before, and you're getting every gruesome, horrific detail. And on top of that, you have the defense trying to paint the person you loved and who was murdered as, you know, this bad person, because that's what they usually do. They go for the victim. I mean, that's kind of part of the process. And then, after you go through all of that, all of it, videos, pictures of the body, then what happens is jury deliberates. And then you have to see if the outcome is what you wanted or were expecting. And then it's not sometimes. So it's grueling. It's absolutely grueling. So I think that plea deals are honestly ideal. But again, I've never been in a position where somebody I loved was murdered, and I had to experience all that to say for sure. And in those trials where, for one reason or another, a jury says not guilty, then you go, was justice served? Was that an accurate conclusion and decision by the jury? And you only get one shot in a trial. Now, Kathleen's mom did a TV interview. It was her first one after hearing this development. And it airs at 11 o'clock, but I will not be recording still at that time. And they did show a clip of it, and she was asked what justice was. And she said that justice is knowing exactly what happened. So that's what she believes justice is. And I would say that about 8 out of 10 cases that I follow, the most common thing is that victims' families do want to know what happened. And I know it's easy for us to say, well, I don't think I'd want to know. Usually they want to know. They want to know. They want to know what happened, what led up to it, what transpired. They want to know it all. And I can't speak for them, but I think that it gives them some form of closure. Maybe it helps with their grief. I'm not quite sure. But usually they want every little detail. I'm going to wrap this up because we can talk about trials and plea deals and grief a million times over in other videos. But I want to end this with saying that Colin, I hope, does the right thing. But the problem is, if he gives up her location, then he's admitting that he did something. So, yeah, I don't see him doing that, especially now that he asked for a lawyer. But I'm hoping that he, after spending a few days in jail, will maybe change his mind and want to aid in her body being returned to her family so she can be laid to rest. I know that there are search parties being organized at this moment for the next few days to look for her, and I would hate for a friend or a family member to be the ones to find her. I would much rather if he would just tell law enforcement and allow them to do it, because he's caused them enough at this point. And yeah, it's the right thing to do. But now, that's going on the assumption he is guilty of this crime. It does appear that way. It has kind of appeared that way for a few days, but I was kind of hoping that it wasn't going to be connected to him, and that this was maybe some type of random act of violence, or maybe she really was alive somewhere, etc. But unfortunately, this is where we're at. And I say that because we, the public, right, in the public court of opinion, he's guilty. But it's not you're guilty until you're proven innocent, you're innocent until proven guilty. We've kind of lost that in the public. And we can do that, right? Because we are the court of public opinion. But the way trials go, actual trials in the court system, is that he is still quote unquote innocent until he's proven guilty. And I know people don't like that. I get it. Trust me, I think he's guilty. I'm just saying that we too often in cases automatically go to somebody is guilty and we deem them guilty until they can prove to us that they're innocent, when it's really supposed to work the opposite way. And I think that too many times in cases we deem people guilty when they're not. And we've seen it time and time again, where people think that somebody is guilty in a case. The great majority thinks that. And then when the case comes to a conclusion, it turns out to be that they were not involved at all. So I wish we were a little bit more careful with that. That being said, in this particular story, an article of clothing with her blood on it, enough for police to believe that she is deceased, does not look great for Mr. Knapp. Again, my heartfelt condolences to her family. I will be emailing her sibling after this video. My heart breaks for you. I felt so touched by Kathleen, and I felt a great deal of sadness hearing this development, and I really wish that you guys had a different outcome. I know that Kathleen knew how many people loved her. There's no way she didn't know. She absolutely had to have known. And I commend all of you for being so aware of when she vanished, and the way you have put out the posts and asking for help in searching for her. It's commendable, and she was so loved. And I think the way everybody has handled this speaks to what kind of person she was. And she's the type of person who didn't deserve this. This is not the way her life should have ended at 34 years old. It's horrific and tragic and senseless and avoidable and heartbreaking. And during this time of year, it's the last thing anybody wants to have to experience. It's just beyond words. And I hope that whatever justice means to you for Kathleen, you get that justice. And until next time, I'll see you soon.